And stuff has survived from, Harriet Tubman and, all kinds of people, which really goes back to mid-19th century. I just wondered if any of it was in a poetic form.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with you in your thought process, because I do think that there is something preceding Wheatley, but again, like, I think when I understand what Karen's saying too about like the biggest, not the biggest, but like super prominent, extremely well known, like formally published, like all of that. But I do wonder what has been documented outside of that framework. So that would be super interesting to learn.
That'd be a good project. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because she was an enslaved person and she was one of the best known poets of the pre-19th century. Looking for her dates.
Spell her last name. I want to be sure I got it spelled right.
Wheat, like the stuff that has gluten, and then L-E-Y.
All right, Wheatley. Yeah.
Yeah, in
A-Y.
August 1761, in want of domestic help, Susanna Wheatley, the wife of a prominent Boston tailor, purchased a slender, frail female child for a trifle, and that was became Phyllis Wheatley. And
oh, so this is old.
maybe the first poem that she wrote was to the University of Cambridge in New England, but it was not published until 1773.
Oh, we have really old stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that is, 1773 is, I don't know why. I think because she's so like, so well known, Karen, I just assumed she wasn't that old,
Oh yeah, 1770 was her first published poem.
Oh, my goodness.
Let's see.
I've really been missing something.
She was 13 when
Oh,
she wrote that, and she wrote that poem after hearing a miraculous saga of survival at sea. She wrote on Mrs. Hussey and Coffin, a poem which was published the 21st of December in 1767. I'm getting all of this from Poetry Foundation's blurb on her. Let me pull that and get back over here to where I can see your lovely faces and put that Poetry Foundation page in the chat.
thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Has anybody made a collection of early African-American poetry? That would be a great project,
Yeah, I feel like there's probably an anthology. Like I don't see what I would be very surprised if there wasn't.
I would be surprised too. I don't know why we haven't heard of that. Well, I know why. I know why. A lot of stuff gets ignored in this society, but it would be something to sort of get out there more in front of people.
This is true. So I also was debating. Well, let me ask this instead of me. I obviously, I always have my slideshow for people who need a visual. I fully get that and understand that because I know when I always need to look at something again. But I did want to ask if there is a topic around community, defining ourselves and freedom. I know that's like all super large buckets of themes that we want to discuss today in particular, because I have like a few different poems. And yeah. And some of them are like, like this Audre Lorde piece I have is a little bit on the heavy side, like last time. And then I have like something that maybe is not as heavy by, I think he's El Salvadorian American poet. So I just wanted to ask these are the poems I have, not the prompts, but what is an interest for you all to discuss when it comes to like what's going on in your life right now, when it comes to personal emancipation, what community means, and how we define ourselves.
Don't everyone speak at once.
That's true. If not, I'm happy to like open it up to a conversation. I can also share my slides just for the recording purposes briefly. But I kind of like have two different ideas, but I also want to see what the group wants. That's important.
Well, I want to do whatever you think is best for us now. You know, you've led us in really interesting ways, and you know, whatever you think is right, I'm up for.
Okay, so I'll have an opportunity. We'll have 3 different poems, and we can just pick 2. That's probably what I'll do, honestly. And then as far as let me share my screen here in 30 seconds, and also inform you of what is going on with the prompt I had just for conversation. So give me 1 second. All right, so it's about migration, but like internal migration. All right, session 4.
Lucia, that second thing in the chat, I just typed your question into search, and that was one of the first things that came up. It's like
what's the second thing? I saw the first thing from the
first thing is Phyllis Wheatley. The second thing is where I typed your question into the search engine, and basically Thought Company has a whole article on early Black American poets.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Not a collection necessarily of them, but you know, a whole bunch of them. And Phyllis is like entry number 3 of 4.
Okay, all right, I just saved that so I can look at that. I see. Okay, great, thank you.
And you know, you can save the entire chat to a file in your computer with the 3 dots. So you don't have to cut and paste. You can save the whole chat.
Okay, thanks. But I mean, like a note, Thought Co.
Okay, any other questions, Lucia, or things you want me to look up or Karen to look up? I feel like Karen is more promising in this regard because I don't know what's going on. I was like, oh, I honestly wouldn't have thought of
official researcher.
Even though you mentioned it, Karen, and it's so like, now that I think about it, I'm like, well, duh, because like when we think of, you know what I mean? So Phyllis Wheatley, I don't think of like 1920, so that makes sense. And I'm maybe not impressed is not the right word. I'm surprised or not surprised, but impressed that she wrote at 13. Yeah. And I wonder, let me make a note to myself, if I should check out Wheatley's pieces and then bring it to the table next time.
Yeah, I mean, and these others that come up on Thought Co. Thought Company. It would be really interesting to go over some of those and compare it to where we are today and the way people are expressing themselves. And
I'll have to be honest, of the 4 that are listed here, Phyllis Wheatley was the only one that I know of. So I mean, this is educational for me too. So I bookmarked it. So
yeah, I bookmarked it too. Yeah.
Who are the other 3, Karen? Do you mind reading them out loud for people who are?
Okay, hang on a second. I have to get out of this full screen to go back over here. Okay, Lucy Terry Prince recited the earliest poem by a Black American. Then Jupiter Hammond was the first Black American to publish a literary text. And
that's Joseph Hammond?
Jupiter.
Is it a woman?
No, he's a gentleman. His first poem in 1760 was an evening thought, salvation by Christ with penitential cries. And he did that in 61. He was never freed, but he was taught to read and write. He was enslaved from birth at 1711.
What part of the country was he in? Does it give a state?
Well, he was a member of organizations such as the African Society of New York City.
Okay, probably New York.
During the Revolutionary War. So remember, this is really early.
That really?
So yeah, he was evidently New York and Pennsylvania area.
Okay.
And then there's George is another guy. Moses.
Yeah, George Moses Horton. In 1828, he became the first Black American to publish poetry in the South. That's where he gets his notoriety.
Yeah,
oh my, that's interesting.
Super cool.
But yeah.
Yeah, I wrote them down just so that I might as well explore, and I would wonder, thinking out loud, if this relates to the thematic pieces relate to anything we're working on now, so just something.
Yeah, you'll have to, they do list every now the titles of some of the poems. I don't know if you'll be able to find them.
Oh, they don't, those websites don't give the poems?
No, they list some of the poems in the article, but no, they don't have links to them.
I bet we could Google it and find them.
Yeah, well, Phyllis Wheatley is widely available. Yeah. So
this is so interesting.
It is highly interesting. Yeah, very cool. So I will look into those, and I appreciate you asking and challenging me. Because I would not have thought of Phyllis Wheatley, and B, I would have not obviously known any of those other people. And I thought Wheatley was like late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean, I knew she wasn't alive right now, but I didn't know it was like that far back. That's wild. Yeah. That is crazy. So the question I have, which relates to all of this, because we talked about indirectly about migration, right? Like Lucy at one point brought up like the Near East Side. I think about migration as a concept that's not just literally involves movement. And then even now, like if one of these poets, like I think Jupiter was in New York, but he was like born into enslavement, like where was he first, right? What generation was he in terms of like being on American soil? So I just wonder about those things. So the question is about migration patterns in your own history and in your own life. And I also mean like internal migration, like, as we heal or grow or, like that, maybe transition to a different mindset or however you want to interpret that. That's how I interpret it. But I thought we could start here for about 5 minutes and then go into, so we can start here just by writing for 5 minutes and then discussing it, or we can start here with discussing it and skipping the introductory writing activity, whatever people want. So you tell me, Lucy and Kieran, what works for you, if you prefer to be like just to straight up talk about it because we're already in the conversation mode, or you want to briefly write just to kind of gather your thoughts. Whatever is fine with me. I'm fine with either. I don't have a problem going straight into writing, but I know warm-ups are important for folks. So let me know what works for both of you.
I'm okay with continuing on with conversation. We don't talk much.
Yeah. So however y'all want to respond to this, I'm curious. Yeah.
I would respond by saying things that, I've sort of looked at over the years, is that there are these very significant migration patterns in among the African-American community in the US, migrating out of the South. And people have studied that, how from like some parts of Georgia, the people went to Chicago, from some parts of Georgia or South Carolina, they went to New York. And I would think how they ended up had a very important impact on their lives. And maybe we can find that in some of the writings that people may have left. I mean, I'm sort of moving this discussion in a historical way, but just something about that seems so interesting to me. So is the poetry that came out of I'm sure you all read about the great African-American diaspora, how they moved out of the South, I guess starting after the Civil War, but it certainly accelerated in the early 20th century and that the Great Depression. That's something I've studied as an economist, how the Great Depression moved so many people out of the South, Black and white.
Yeah,
Lucia,
yeah.
I'm not sure whether it'll be as much of a revelation to you as it was to me, is that we keep forgetting about the points of entry for African slaves into this country, and they weren't all in the South. You've got through Virginia, you've also got through Annapolis, and so those people actually didn't migrate north. They moved laterally to the Appalachian area, and then maybe moved north for economic reasons to Ohio. They weren't running from slavery because they were just on the other side of the Mason-Dixon line. So
running for opportunity.
Yeah, basically the economic opportunity. And I don't think that necessarily it was after the migration from the South. I think it may have taken part kind of simultaneously.
No,
interesting. And I also think about people who were like indentured servants who like came to New York from the Caribbean and other places. I didn't even know that until I met somebody who does like walking tours in New York, talking about like the history of indentured servants and their mark that they made in New York City exclusively, and then how they when they like were freed or released or whatever the term is when it comes to indentured servants, because
contracts up.
they had more liberties, right?
Yeah.
And obviously liberties is very minimal term, but like how they bought land in like what's contemporary like Wall Street type, high price real estate. So how not only did they like build, but they like also prospered, and like prosper is not the right word, but like built life, bought land, all of that, right? And so they were like considered to be somewhat affluent, and so just it's just remarkable. Like I would have never thought of any of those things, but I just learned that in the last 5 years.
Well, also if you look at the coal camps too, and the makeup of the population in Appalachia, you have Scottish, Irish, Italian, African American. So you have this mix of people who came from various places to the coal fields, economics. And then as those that dried up, then those same people then moved to the industrial area. So
yeah, and I also wonder, what's like, I'm not an Ohio native, but like I'm almost like offended, even though I'm not, I don't support like the Confederate flag as a symbol or whatever people want to justify it as. But when I see it in Southern Ohio, I'm always like, you're not even like, the Mason-Dixie line is like, no, we're like by Canada. Like, so it's, and not, and maybe it's this Texas, like we can carry the Confederate flag, but you can't. But like, it's always like almost insulting in that, we're recording, so I probably shouldn't say all this. It's going to be on public air, but just this idea of like, I'm literally in the Midwest, like right underneath Michigan and Canada, and people like hold the Confederate flag. And then one of my friends who's a history nerd mentioned the migration pattern of people that, came to Ohio with that culture, understanding that we're not south of this Mason-Dixie. So I just find it really fascinating. And I wonder like how culture permeates with migration, right, into like mainstream or, whatever. And I don't know if anybody else has more to say about that, like why people think it's acceptable to do that when we're literally all the way north, And again, let's just say you don't see it as a racist, fundamentally flawed flag. Let's just say it's like a Southern loyalty, and you remove the racial piece. I still don't understand, other than like why you would, I don't know. It's like annoying and confusing, and I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or insight on it. But Ohio is just very odd in so many ways, and in a very beautiful but very challenging ways at the same time.
Nothing showed that more than the last election, because if you look at a map as how people voted, Ohio was literally a set of blue islands in a sea of red. So You had your more metropolitan areas were Democratic and blue. And then all the outlying area in Ohio was Republican majority. So, but the thing is that I'm afraid that I'm one of the people that thinks that the Confederate flag is an insult, because you've got it's commemorative of when a time in history when people were committing treason against the newly formed Union.
Yes.
And then you want to proudly wave that, it's astounding to me that people, well, okay, not so much, because the last election showed us how much people will hang on to really stupid, really stupid notions and ideas. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think people justify it by saying it's like part of our culture, right? But I'm like, then when I see it in Ohio, I'm like, is that your argument? Because you're literally like not even close to any water, and you're literally north, and geographically you have no legitimacy in that argument. And of course, I don't appreciate it when I see it in Texas. It's the way people say, don't come to this neighborhood. It's, nice way to let me know I don't belong there. But yeah, I always found it so interesting. And like, why do people migrate to Ohio? What was the intent? Was it because we're going to Appalachia and a lot of Ohio has, you know what I mean? Like the idea of opportunity, but like, what kind of opportunity is it really,
Just remember that nobody migrates by themselves.
Yeah, they bring their whole village.
So you bring your whole village, you bring your whole culture, you move to an area where people are like you. So a bunch of Southerners with Confederate flags moved to Southern Ohio. Okay. You bring your culture with you, and find places where your culture is accepted or is in the majority. And that's part of a migration pattern.
Yeah, that's true. Because, I think of even like the Dust Bowl, what Lucia was talking about in the Depression, they're not exactly the same time period, but like how people, like, I think of like wagons, like, people like going across the country, like 1 mile an hour, and how that looked, and maybe because I used to read a lot of Faulkner because he's a brilliant writer, and, it's this the historical time period always aligns with that. But that's what you're right. That's what I think of. You don't just, like modern migration. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to move to a different state with 1.5 people, right? Like one being you and your dog. And so I guess that is, it's very different, but that's a good point, Karen. And I wonder if people moved because they felt comfortable, or if it was like exclusively opportunity based, was 99% of your reason, hey, there's more opportunity here in the forest of Ohio for me and my family, or do I feel like I can, like I have a cousin here who's, what I mean? I can just I can pop up shop with and establish some kind of business or, whatever, coal industry.
It's kind of a I don't know, personally, my mom raised me to think of things in terms of if you're we know you're gonna strike out as a child and move to other places when you're in your young adulthood, but soothe your mother's heart by making it someplace where you got relatives, because your relatives will always at least give you a dinner. So you move to this city because cousin so-and-so lives there, or even from, like Lucia was saying with the Southern thing, a lot of times people sent their children up to Chicago to stay with an aunt because it wasn't safe for them in the South. So a lot of times the migration is not only economic, but it's also for a mother protecting her children. It's like, please go somewhere where we have relatives who will take you in and aid you with getting settled and introduce you to the right people and stuff. And we still carry that on. I mean, if you talk to anybody who has a child who's getting ready to go to college, we try and influence their choices. No, don't move all the way to Portland, Oregon. One, I can't get there in a hurry if you need me. and two, we don't have any relatives there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point. I wonder what Lucia, you think, and Karen, what you were mentioned too. Like, I think about how the government works in terms of immigration and like even sponsoring somebody to come here, like based, and that's very location based. And I also think about like new Americans, and like, for example, my dad came in the 70s, and I don't know if he had any even really distant relatives, but it's like, and I thought that when you said Chicago, but it's like, hey, I'm in Chicago. A lot of people that look like me are here. Somebody can help me find a job, and I can send money to my parents, and you know what I mean? Like put food on the table. And so that's very interesting. I just maybe didn't assume, I would have not assumed that. The same logic of like, I mean, I guess communities of color to some extent naturally overlap in the way they think for like safety, community, all those reasons, but that's super interesting.
And you have the same patterns affecting Columbus. I mean, when Somalis come, they're usually kind of gathered around by the Somali community. So you have people, little pockets all throughout the city of people who are being welcomed in by immigrants before them and forming community. The same sort of thing happened down like in Texas with the Vietnamese and the shrimping industry. When they came in, that's where they were kind of concentrated, was on the Gulf. You've got concentrations of immigrants up near Vancouver, also Vietnamese who came in that way from Canada. So you've got people who come into an area probably because they know someone who's immigrated there before and then form community. So that influences immigration too.
It's true. Miss Lucia, did you want to add anything? And again, if you want me to pronounce her name differently, I know you mentioned like,
no, that's fine.
The Spanish version, but whatever you prefer.
That's fine. That's fine. No, I mean, Karen, the studies that I'm familiar with, she's right. Usually a few people go to an area, and then that starts an immigration pattern for other people they knew, at least in the Southern one that I've seen literature on, that if your people in your county got to Chicago, then you're more likely, the others who are left behind are more likely to go there because they know people. If you want to relate this to poetry, how interesting would it be to look at, the poetry coming out of these different communities? Poetry sort of, is a very intimate way to express your experience. Sociologists write about what was the experience of the African Americans who came from the South and went to Chicago. What was the experience of the ones who went to New York, who got out further to California? What is, looking at all these things. And I bet if the poetry of these people could be identified and related to the particular geographic area where they landed, I bet that would be very revealing.
Yeah. I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because some of the poems I have are by like new American, like first, second generation folks, and talk about migration. And I thought about this just because of like what's going on in our world, but also like thinking of migration, identity, history, like all of those connect together. When I first put this like curriculum together, they're like, you can't have 15 themes. And I'm like, well, I can't have one theme. It's not how I operate. So if we want to rein it in at any point, just let me know. I'm happy to do that. But I'll let you all select the poem that you feel like we want to start with. And Lucia, if you want to add anything else, I want to give you an opportunity too, if you want to add anything else to what you were saying before we.
No, let's go ahead with what you've planned. This looks interesting.
Okay, yeah. I'm, what, I can pull out a poem about a lot of things at different times. So there's three. The one that kind of ties to what we talked about last time is After Images by Audre Lorde. And then this ties into some questions about like racial, I don't want to say, it's not really about racial tension, but just, yeah, it is about like murder, essentially, just to be explicit, around race. And then Let Me Try Again and Kathy Lynchy is more like about like immigration-ish type stories. I don't know if I would exactly describe Kathy Lynn's like that, but yeah. And I've met the last two poets actually. I think even in the same capacity, in the same conference. So which one would you like to start with? And we can just stick to one. And if we want to do two, we have time for two. That's lovely as well.
I know I definitely want to hear that Kathy Lynn one. I don't know. It looks like you've made three good choices. Let's see how far we go.
I know I can't decide either. That's why I'm like, oh, I'll just put them all out here. And see which
The
one,
date, the date, December 3rd, 1975. What an enticing kind of title. I can't imagine what this is going to be about. So I sort of agree with Karen. Maybe we can see what Kathy.
Okay, yeah. And so Kathy, I think her name is pronounced Kathy Lynn Che.
Lynn Che, okay.
And she is an Asian American writer leader in the community. She's like ran the Kundiman, which I can tell you about later, for many years.
I think I've heard of her. I think
Yeah.
I heard her at a reading. That's what I was like. Yeah.
And she just had a reading last week too. Like it was a Kundiman like special. So this is about her family. But again, I think it's interesting. So I will just like do a gentle scroll. As you can see, I'm a queen of having 95 tabs, too many open. Like, I don't know if Karen's that bad because you said to close stuff. And I'm like, I should probably close everything. Yeah. So let's use this one. Uh-oh, I hope it doesn't cross me off. But The Nation produces poems actually, and they're very interesting. So let's go back here. Okay. So whoever wants to read, and I'm going to drop this in the chat too, just because that's important for, I know it's hard and annoying when you have to scroll on the screen, but who would like to read?
It's funny. I've got your PowerPoint pulled up, and there's nice links. Really, it makes it easy to pull them up.
Oh,
okay,
so I tried to make it nicer, but I was like, I changed my mind early on too, and then I was like, oh, I'll just keep the links. Because usually I try to hyperlink it, but
the links are great
for you. So I added those three links. Like I'm like, let me just pick three.
So which one are we gonna go with?
Yeah, this one by Kathy Lynn.
Okay.
Do you see it on the screen, Karen?
I'm on the screen that I pulled up from the link. I have the poem. You want me to read it?
Yeah, and then I'll scroll slowly, just to make sure we keep up.
Okay, December 3rd, 1975 by Kathy Lynn Che. A Golden Shovel. My mother wakes early to go to church. Dawn redux. Her aldite is Virgin Mary blue. Her hair is still long, reflecting light. A border control officer filters through her documents, preparing to send her through to their new home destination. The casting call goes out in the meantime. Paid extras needed for jungle defoliation scene. Apocalypse Now and Heart of Darkness play across the screen of my mother's face. I glimpse a flicker, a flare, then the sudden foul odor of napalm and oil in the swamp. In the opening scene, a man showers. The mist rises and clings to the blue tarp, temporary walls to maintain the privacy of the 100 refugees at the Jose Fabela Center. Trees flank the main road. This stay could last forever, or it could be a stopgap before the repatriation of our protagonist back to the jungle, where he could have spent a decade of his 30s into 40s being tortured in a re-education camp, lucky to not be one of 3.9 million dead. He scrubs off his 12 years as a soldier, a long 6 months ago. Dissolve. Our protagonist in a small boat at sea, view of my mother's pallid face. The camera moves to the sea as the boat drifts closer toward land in the distance. Through starlight, then dawnlight, the journey begins its 8th day. Mist burns off. Cut to my mother tilting a canteen toward her lips. She drinks down seasickness. Cut to Che, visibly pregnant, clinging to the edge as the boat lurches over a wave. Cut to my father cooking chowka over a tepid fire, then my mother unloading a mouthful of bile into the water.
Thank you. Let me allow for a pause. Yeah, and this one, I guess, is more, I would say, like, again, I didn't really know how to describe it, but more metaphorical. I looked at this one a few weeks ago.
Oops. I forgot. As a golden shovel, we should be able to read the last word on each line as a separate poem. So you want me to go back through and do that? Read that
Yeah, you can.
poem that was incorporated?
Yeah, if that is simple for you to do with that link,
Okay,
go ahead.
I'm back on the other page. Okay. Early dawn blue light filters through the jungle and across a foul swamp. That's the first stanza. A mist clings to the trees. This could be the jungle of a million years ago. And the last stanza, our view moves closer through the mist, tilting down to the tepid water. So now I kind of wonder where she got those lines from.
Now, this is something new to me. Explain what this golden shovel phenomena is.
Yeah, it's a form that Terrence Hayes has made popular, and Gwendolyn Brooks too. That basically you take a quotation, a line, part of a poem, and you write a poem and you space that other poem in there as the last words of the line.
So you're saying that the quote comes first and then the entire poem comes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me pull it. I'm sure there's a more academic way to say that. that was the layman's introduction.
So this is complicated.
Basically, all right, golden shovel, the poetic form, Gwendolyn Brooks did it basically. And then Terrence Hayes created the form and was inspired by Gwendolyn Brooks. And the rules for a golden shovel are that you take a line or lines from a poem you admire, use each word in the line or lines as the end word in your poem. All these pop-up ads, man. Okay. Keep the end words in order. Give credit to the poet who originally wrote the line or lines, and the new poem does not have to be about the same subject as the poem that offers the end words. So if you pull a line with 6 words, your poem would be 6 lines long. So, and it's the ones that they suggest, basically he used in the golden shovel, Terrence Hayes used We Real Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks. So, and it's fun to try. It's tough. It's tough to write.
A crossword puzzle, sort of.
It's kind of like a reverse acrostic, more or less, because
yeah, it's really
it's kind of like putting your letter at the end of the line instead of at the beginning.
Yeah,
like
wow.
Acrostic. Yeah. But it's a fun form to play with. But like I said, it's tough to write, get an idea across that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. And what thoughts on this poem? I feel like it's, obviously about migration, and in this case, I guess she's recalling her mother's past. And the napalm reference takes us to Vietnam. So, or I assume takes us to Vietnam. I don't know if it was used anywhere else.
And I'm assuming that December 3rd, 1975 was the fall of Saigon. I have to reaffirm that, but 1975 was the fall of Saigon, when a lot of Vietnamese people did immigrate out of Vietnam.
Okay. All right. Thoughts, Karen, when you were reading it, how did you feel? Lucia, Miss Linda, anybody really who would like to share?
Well, it's a very vivid
Yes.
expression of, the horrors of being in that situation. It has both, light and darkness in it. Darkness. Who would want to be in a boat like that with your mother vomiting over the side? What a horrible image for, I guess she's a child at this time. And yet they were going to a better place. A lot of challenges ahead, certainly wasn't going to be easy, but it's interesting how she weaves those two feelings come out in me, light and darkness, in this poem.
I definitely thought her descriptions were really vivid. Right? You can kind of like see there, especially that middle stanza, like a man clings to blue tarp temporary walls to maintain the privacy of 100 refugees. Trees flank the road, and this could last forever. And Karen, what were your feelings as you read both versions?
That the descriptions were very very vivid, and even the golden shovel part of the poem, those were like little haiku, and they were descriptive of nature and the surroundings. So
yeah. And do you think that you could like write about, I don't even know, when I was thinking about her comment about the pregnancy, it made me wonder who her mom is pregnant with, right? Is it with her?
I think I would think so.
Or
And by the way,
Really?
it wasn't the fall of Saigon. I put that in the chat. It wasn't the fall of Saigon because that happened in April of 75, and December of 75 was when Laos fell to the communist forces. So they were emigrating ahead of a political change.
Yeah, to get as refugees probably, right? So
yeah.
All right, now are we sure that, I don't know how to pronounce SC, is her mother?
I'm gonna assume
there's a lot in here that needs research. It seemed to me that this person who wrote this was there, but maybe this is stuff that's been told to her.
Yeah, or how she envisions it. But I mean, I do think it's her real mother, and I wonder if their date of migration was that they're, like, because they're on the ship, or it's not a ship, it's a boat, yeah. So I wonder if it's, just like she takes it back, like, oh, here we are, and now let's go back to this time in history. Yeah, and I'm like, ooh, what is your next poem, right? But I know this is not about that. It's about what is happening here in this poem. So other thoughts?
What is Kathy Lynn Jay writing about now? I mean, when was this poem actually written, and is it an older poem of hers, or somebody know the context?
It's from last year, September 23rd.
Oh, so this
but
is
again, like it could be that's when it was published, but she wrote it like 10 years before that.
Okay.
Let me also show you what she is writing these days. 1 second.
And we could
She
see
does have a book, but her book is it's not something I just dropped like in the last year or anything.
what is her birth year? That'll tell us if she was
I thought about looking that up, but I'm like, it's a bit creepy.
She is really, I mean, even on Wiki, that is kind of guarded. Most people, when you pull up the Wiki on them, they list their date of birth and no, it's not there.
Oh, all right. So we don't know.
So she's kind of guarding that age thing there.
I wonder if we can I thought about that as well in terms of like how old she could be, and if we can tell she's pregnant. I wouldn't be surprised if she's worked for Kundiman for at least like 10 years, and that was not, it wasn't like her first job out of school or anything. But let me look up some of her poems that she's written now, at least to get an idea, and then I could ask for her age. I could send her an email.
Did you pull up her? You're pulling up her website?
No, well, I'm trying to just look for like modern poems. I just put the screen share on pause. But I find stuff from like 2015 and whatever. I don't necessarily see stuff that is older. Yeah, I see stuff like 2019, some 2015. So I should just probably type in 2021.
That's
but,
her personal website I just posted. So.
Yeah. But I don't know if I would have her email. I mean, her age, I guess. So what I did find out.
Wow.
She looks young. I'm just looking at what Karen posted.
Yeah, and that has a list of her poems and essays and interviews.
Does it have anything?
Yeah,
does it have anything recent other than like in the last 6 months that you see?
They don't have dates on them, unfortunately. Select poems.
She's
essays.
very carefully hiding her age, because when you look at her CV and education, almost everybody puts the date which they get degrees, but you can always figure out the age from that. She doesn't.
I'm like, wow, this is like a tracer's challenge here.
This is a very unusual looking curriculum.
I'll ask her. I have her email, so I talk to her like probably once a year. And she actually had a reading last week where she read some of her work that was recorded and on YouTube.
Yeah. And on that CV, there are two select interviews and publications from 2022. So you've got Zombie Apocalypse Now, pandemic, and then Bomb That Tree Line Back from Guernica Press. And those were both this last year on her CV.
Yeah, I'll find out for you all. I'll ask her, say we would like to know if your mom was pregnant with you or a different sibling. Please, this intricate detail is highly important to our comprehension of this piece. Yeah.
And she has she co-wrote a children's book.
Yeah.
A is for Asian American, and that'll be published next year.
Yeah, so that's and I guess that one doesn't necessarily have poems, but that does seem super cool. Yeah, especially granted the culture that we're in, of all the cultures that we're caught in these days with current events.
It says people also search for, let's see what that come up. People also search for her age.
So we're not the only ones who are curious.
Right. I love Google for that, because they list other people's
right. It comes up, you know what's going on.
Let's see. Somebody wrote in 2015, yeah, she's about my age. Okay, come on. Whoever Dive Dapper is.
Do while Karen looks up those.
Well, if she was the one who was, what her mother was pregnant with, she'd be about, I get 47, just doing the math, almost 50.
Right, yeah, I wouldn't, because I thought about if she would be a lot older than that. If she's 10 years older than your, so I wouldn't be surprised if her mom was pregnant with her and she's narrating this. And
yeah, in 75. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So she's late 40s, about 50.
Yeah, I can confirm. I'll try to confirm those details. I'll say this is important. We have some controversy on your age.
I
don't think she's going to answer that.
She might. I'll say, hey, no, or I can just ask, I can just say, hey, were you pregnant, or was this your sibling, or you? So I'll just ask like that. That way I don't have to pressure her.
Well, I really don't think that she's writing it as a personal recollection.
Yes, I agree.
I think that it's pre her birth.
Yeah, and also because like the attention to detail, right? Like even with her mom vomiting, her dad like doing the cooking or whatever, like on the fire. I do think that it's pretty intricate. So I agree, because I'm like, oh, if she was 5, would she remember that? Or did her mother journal this? Like, where is this from? So those thoughts have crossed my mind.
Well, there is an interview, but I'm still not finding her saying where her age is yet.
The next thing I want, Sharon, let us know if you get any juice. I don't think you'll be successful if you've already gotten this search, because you know it's popular and people haven't found anything. Do you all prefer to read another poem or to just write and then share, since it is about one? I'm fine with either. And again, what I often do, as you might see, is I just like drag the poems to another date. So if we want to discuss them, I think I have like in the lesson plans, I have like at least 15 poems, or I don't think we're gonna run out anytime soon. And I can always find more and add different ones. So
What were the other two on your list? Can you put your list back up?
oh yeah, sorry, I thought it was on the right page.
Maybe I'm gonna have to cut out before long, but maybe we could do one more from that list.
Yeah, let's do another
Yeah.
poem.
Okay, which one would you like? So again, the After Images talks about Emmett Till.
Oh.
It's not just about, you know, it's heavy, as I mentioned. And then the Let Me Try Again by Javier Zamora, who has age, I know, I think he's like 33-ish, is a shorter poem, but again, about his book that I have is about migration.
Let's do
His journey
Javier.
as an immigrant, as an undocumented immigrant.
I put my vote in for Javier.
Okay, Lucia, do you have
Okay,
an
yeah.
interest?
Yeah.
Okay, and I can still share the other one. So like I can still share the poetry foundation After Images one. Okay, so I think I already have this open actually. All right. So let me make sure this one is loading. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's from like very confident he's from Central America. I think he's
El Salvador.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
says El Salvador.
Okay, so I can read this, or Lucy, if you want to read this one isn't very long. And as always, I can drop the link in the chat.
Okay, I'll read.
All right,
Let
whenever
me
you are ready.
Let me try again. Javier Zamora. I could bore you with the sunset, the way water tasted after so many days without it, the trees, the breed of dogs, but I can't say there were 40 people when we found the ranch with the thin white man, his dogs, and his shotgun. Boy, that's that's a powerful sentence.
Wow.
Until this 5 a.m., I couldn't remember there were only 5 or 7 people. We separated by the Palaverdes. Is that how you say that? We, I'm not sure. We, meaning 4 people, not 40. The rest, I don't know. They weren't there. Need to scroll up. Can you scroll a little more?
Oh yeah, sorry, down. Yeah, sorry. I'm also looking up.
They weren't there when the thin white man let us drink from a hose while pointing his shotgun. In Pancho Spanish, he told us, si corre perros atacar, if run dogs trained attack. When La Migra arrived, an officer who probably called himself Hispanic at best, not Mexicano, like we called him, but Buenas noches, and gave us pan dulce y chocolate. Procedure says he should have taken us back to the station. Keep scrolling. Back to the station, checked our fingerprints, etc., etc. He must have remembered his family over the border, or the border coming over them. That's a powerful one. But he drove us to the border and told us, next time, rest at least 5 days. Don't trust anyone calling themselves coyotes. Bring more tortillas, sardines, Alhambra. He knew we would try again and again, like everyone does.
Wow.
Ooh. Mm.
So I'll give this a minute to sit.
Whew.
And I don't know what Palo Verdes is, but like it's
It's the trees.
yeah, that's what I thought. But it's a special kind of tree.
Yeah, I looked it up.
Okay.
It's a thorny yellow flowered tree or shrub that grows along water courses in warm desert areas of America.
Okay. Yeah. So I wonder if this is like from the Sonora.
It's a pretty tree. There are also several towns called Palo Verde, so named after the trees, probably.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And like Migra right here refers to immigration, like the immigration officers, or
Migra.
border controller, whatever, the police or whatever you want to call them.
This really hits home with the ambiguity of so many of these officers who are working for the immigration authorities, and yet their heart is really with the people who are like them, who they sympathize with so much, that there must be such an ambiguity in their lives. I don't know. That's a powerful thought. I mean, what are we doing here? That's probably sort of sums up what he's thinking. What am I doing here? What are we doing here? That's a great
and that's interesting. And it says, like, I think he's there's somewhere, I was just looking for it, who probably called himself Hispanic at best, versus like La Mexicano, so like, versus identify with like a specific cultural subculture, right, other than just being of the entire region. Yeah, I that line spoke to me.
Yeah.
Well, it's so many people think that because they're coming over the southern border, that they're all Mexican, and that's not true. We've got people who have hiked miles and miles and miles from El Salvador, Honduras, Colombia, that are mixed into that group. So,
and
yeah. And I wonder if to them he looks Mexican, but they just called him that. He said buenos noches, gave us pan dulce and chocolate. Yeah.
But the line about he must have remembered his family over the border, or the border coming over them, that is so important, because so many of those people in the lower part of Texas, they were really there before Americans were there, and then that land, they were part of Mexico, and then that land got ceded to the U.S. after what the Spanish American War, I don't know, some war down there. It was at the Alamo, I don't remember. But really, the border, they didn't cross the border crossed them. And then suddenly they weren't Americans anymore, but really they were there a long time before it was part of America. So, I mean, that brings that out so vividly. It just brings up the total confusion and mess over all of this. And why can't we get past?
Yeah, I didn't think about the history when I read that line, so I'm glad you brought it up. The border coming over them,
Yeah.
He has another his entire book, unaccompanied. I can show it you all. I think I have it close by, but it's all about his journey. Like, it's a lot. I respect him a lot as a poet, but it's very thematically tied together by this,
Yeah, I was looking at the poems that are listed at the bottom of that page too. By him. Deportation letter, citizenship. No, actually, soy Salvadoriano.
Yeah.
So it's his book is all about his own personal immigration story. Wow.
Yeah, I think it started with like he had some poems where like his mom, you know what I mean? Like he was living with his grandma while his mom migrated, then he migrated, how he was born. About his father, I should say, not necessarily how he was born, but yeah. And then I think he migrated when he was like young, not 5, but he wasn't grown, like somebody carried him on their back basically. And he kept in touch with that man, and then they realized later he died, and he was migrating to like avoid gang threats or whatever, and then he ended up passing away anyway, so somebody got him on this side in the network. So yeah, thoughts on this, Lucia? I know you said you have to leave early, and then we can kind of go into potential writing.
Yeah, no, this is great. I do have to go. It's great to be with you.
Likewise.
And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
All
We'll be together on
right.
March 29th. Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Miss Karen, did you want to write? I also need to send you an email, which I might do before 1:30.
I don't know if my brain's working well enough to write anything.
No, it's up to you. I mean, you tell me, because it's just you. I mean, I'm open to Casey and Miss Linda's opinion too, so no pressure. And I need to actually send you an email with the other sources. I just thought about that today when I was logging on. Like, did I ever email Karen back? So you tell me what you want to do. And I don't mean that to pressure you.
I'm not
but like
saying
you
that any
said,
work would come out of it, but you could drop a prompt if you want.
okay. Yeah. I also don't necessarily feel like I'm in the writing mode, but then I'm also like, ooh, maybe it's good to push myself. And see what happens. Let me still also drop the prompt. I copied all this over like before we started from the oops. I tried to open my email and search for your name. I don't know if you saw all that. Okay, so we talked about this. Oh no, where did my prompts go? I think they're out of order. Hold on.
Okay, I've got slide 35.
Is this what you see?
Hold on, gotta come back to you. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, yeah. So I don't know what slide this is, but yeah. So just right about, I mean, now I did change this up a little bit from what I had. But like you can pick heritage, migration, right? However you see, and then I just wrote like write words out that come to your own what comes to mind with your own heritage. If you're feeling writer's block and want to go that direction. And then what the other option is what internal migrations have you experienced? And then try to just tie those together. But however you want to approach it, I would use Javier Zamora's poem as your either one of them as your anchor. If there's, I mean, I guess one of them is about a specific date. So whatever is vibing with you, we can write for like 20 minutes, maybe like 18 minutes.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to open my own document and pop out some lines myself.
I was muted, but I was saying if you don't want to share screen anymore, I have it on another tab.
Okay. Casey, are you gonna write with us? No pressure. Since we're recording, I thought I would put you on the spot. All right. And then just before we leave, Karen, remind me to send you an email. I need one thing from you, and I send you one thing. So Karen, let's do 5 more minutes. I hope you're getting some juicy stuff. Okay, Miss Karen, did you want to share?
I guess I will. As they say, it ain't great. I decided to challenge myself and try and do a golden shovel. So we'll see how that works.
That's very, very impressive for the time frame.
Then the ends of the lines are basically home is where the heart is, and there's no place like home. Okay. How did Columbus become a place that I call home? The story of a reverse migration. It is how the protagonist leaves a nomad life where her family moved every 3 or so years. The existence of a military family where constant change is at the heart of every arrival and departure. It is the story of how I have lived in the same house for 23 years. There's a kind of satisfaction in having lived no other place for so long. No peace, a peace in being able to like where you are and be able to call it home. There you go.
That is very impressive. I'm glad this was recorded because I can go back and listen in. And I sent you an email, by the way, just not, you don't have to look at it now, but just to put on your radar. That's super impressive. I did not try that at all. I wrote, I was thinking about like Javier Zamora's poem and just this like literal, I mean, they're both of them were like literal migrations, but just about my grandparents and how I don't really know a lot about their histories. I can read if you're interested to stay on an extra minute, or I'm happy to skip. This is recorded, so I'm always like, who's gonna look at this? Okay. My mother tells me of my grandmother's migration, how Nani's house help hid her beneath blankets in huge clay pots. So when they came through, they wouldn't take her. How they fried babies in oil, they say, disrupted families, pushed them out of their own homes. How they went by foot and by truck or train, packed belongings in sheets, tied them together, thrown over their shoulders. How neighbors that shared food now rioted and spat at one another. Did neighbors that still had love stay together after? Did they know if the other made it and alive? Set up temporary shelter, birthed children on the dirt floor, and didn't talk about what they'd been through. Nobody talks about migration at the dinner table or at brunch or at chai in my grandparents' house. But I wonder if there are some of us who did not fall into the trap of the colonizer, who still loved one another deeply with passion despite of our fates, who wore a dupatta or a bindi, and it didn't matter how you viewed your God. That's what I got. I wanted to write a lot more, and then I tried to look up some like historical references, because I don't know a lot. Because it's not, I mean, I don't know if it's not talked about in this poem. I mentioned that like in just a way, because it's like everybody dealt with it, you know, you don't like sit around and talk, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I would compare it to, but it's something everybody experienced, or what it's, you know, more about. But I just find a video of like some stories of like the, you know, migration or diaspora, whatever you want to call it, to see if I could like pick up some stuff. So yeah. Thank you for coming, Karen. And I did send you some problems in case you want to write every day. Yeah, we're not in workshop, but the next, on the other slide I had that I probably showed, it just said the next date is March 29th. I believe it is on Zoom. Same time, same website, and tell your friends. And I'm happy to rock and roll with whoever is present, 2 people or 10 people. So yeah, thank you for being here and staying on a little bit longer. Thanks, Casey, for your help each time. And then let Miss Linda know, I'll probably call her after my 2 o'clock.
You're very welcome.
Okay, all right, have a lovely rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.